We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph and Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 24a. The Gemara is in the middle of a statement of Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, three things that a Talmud Chacham lies about, and the third thing is Uvu Ushbiza by his host. Rashi explains Bushbiza about his host. Sha'alu al Ushbizo, meaning if they asked the Talmud Chacham about his host, Im Kiblu B'Sever Panim Yafos, if the host was a good host. V'Yamar Lav, so the Talmud Chacham says no. Mida Tovi, that's actually a good mida for him to say no, even though the host was good. He says the host was not good. Why? So people who are improper, they don't try to get invited over, lavo tamid olav yichlas mamono, to constantly come over to this person and to consume his money. And so therefore that again, that's the third thing, that it's a good thing, so to speak, for the Talmud Chacham to lie about. And the Gemara continues, my nafkamina, what difference does it make that they only lie about these three things? Amar Marzutra says, that you return to a Talmud Chacham, a lost object, just by recognition. And the idea is, if we know that this particular Talmud Chacham doesn't lie except for these three things, so then we'll return it to him. But if he lies about other things, so then we will not return it to him. And the Gemara continues, Marzutra Chasida igniv le'kasa dechasba meushbiza. Marzutra Chasida was stolen from his host a silver goblet. Chazi alahu bar beirav. He saw a certain student, Demoshe Yadev Nagiv beglima dechavri, that he washed his hands and he dried them on the cloak of his friend. So Marzutra Chasida said, Hainu hai delo ichbis lei amamona dechavri. This is a person who doesn't care about the money of his friend. So Kavse, so he bound him, he tied up that student, Viodi, and that student admitted to stealing the silver goblet. And the Gemara continues, Tanya, we learned in a brayso, Umoder Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar admits, Bekelim Chadoshim Shesavatan Ha'ayin, if you have new kelim, if you have new vessels that the eye has sufficiently seen, Shechayiv Lahachers, that you are obligated to announce those vessels. V'yeluhain Kelim Chadoshim Shelo Savatan Ha'ayin, and the following are new vessels that the eye has not sufficiently seen, She'eno Chayiv Lahachers, which you are not chayiv to announce. Kagon, for example, Bade Machten Vitzinorios, these are branches upon which needles or utensils for spinning hang, umachrozos shel kardumos, and strings of axes. Kalelu sha'amru, all of these items that they say the person is permitted to keep. Emasai mutarim, when are they permitted? Bizman shemitzon echad echad, that's if the person finds them one at a time. Aval mitzon shnayim, but if the person finds two of them together, so then chayiv lahachers, then the person is obligated to announce these items. And the Gemara says, my bade, what does the word bade mean? It means shoch, it means branches, as we translated. V'amai karule badi, why is it called badi? Davar de talu be midi, because if you have something which you hang something on, bad karule, that's referred to as a bad. Kiyahu detnan, like that which we learned, hasam over there. Ale echad bebad echad, one leaf on one branch. And Tosas explain, Aval Shnayim Chayiv Lahachers, if there are two of them, the person is obligated to announce a dominion, have a siman, because the number becomes a siman. And the Brisa continues, V'chein Hayer Rav Shimon ben Elazar Omer, and likewise Rav Shimon ben Elazar says, Hamatzil min ho'ari u'min hadov, u'min ha'nomer u'min ha'bardalis, if somebody saves something from a lion or a bear or a leopard, or a chido, min zuto shel yam, u'mishluliso shel nar, or from the tide of the sea or the flooding of the river, Hamotzi bisrati u'plati u'gadol, if a person finds something in a large thoroughfare or a large plaza, Uv'chol makom sharab mitzuyin sham, or any place where there's a lot of people, Harei elu shalo, he can keep those items, mimnei sha'abayla mesyaishin mehen, because the owners despair from those items. And Rashi explains, V'chol makom shaharabim v'afilu davar sheyesh bo siman, we're talking here even with something that has a siman, still if it's an area where there's a large amount of people, the person is allowed to keep the item. And the Gemara continues, they had the following question, Kiko Amar Rav Shimon ben Elazar barov Kananim, when did Rav Shimon ben Elazar say you're allowed to keep the item, let's say in an area where there's a lot of people, is that specifically when it's a majority Kananim? Aval barov Yisrael lo, but if it would be majority Jewish, then you wouldn't be able to keep the item? Oh, Dilmor, maybe Afilu barov Yisrael Nami Amar, maybe he said it even in a situation where it's majority Jewish. And the Gemara continues in Tim Salomer, if you're going to say Afila Barov Yisrael Nami Amar, that he said it even in a situation where it's majority Jewish, even there you're allowed to keep it. Pligi Rabbanan Alel, lo Pligi, do the Rabbanan argue on Rav Shimon ben Elazar, or do they not argue on Rav Shimon ben Elazar? V'im Tim Salomer Pligi, and if you're going to say that they do argue, Barov Yisrael Vadai Pligi, so certainly they argue if it's majority Jewish. There they would argue and say you're not allowed to keep it. But Barov Kananim Pligi, but do they argue by a situation of Rov Kananim as well? O lo Pligi, or do they not argue over there. V'im timtzu lomar pligin, if you're going to say they argue by rov kananim as well. V'im timtzu lomar pligi afilu b'rov kananim, again, if you're going to say they argue even by rov kananim. Halacha kamoso, ein halacha kamoso, is the halacha like Rav Shimon ben Elazar, or is the halacha not like Rav Shimon ben Elazar? And im timtzu lomar halacha kamoso, if you're going to say the halacha is like Rav Shimon ben Elazar, davka b'rov kananim, is that only when it's majority kananim? O afilu b'rov Yisrael, or is that even if it's majority Yisrael? And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from the following Braisa, Hamotzi mos bebate knasios uvevate midrashos, if somebody finds money in the shuls or in the bate medrash, uvechol makom sharab metzuyin sham, any place where there's a lot of people, hareelu shalo, he's able to keep the money, mivnei shabayla mesyaishin mehen, because the owners, they despair from the money. And so the Gemara says, Man shamat le dazel basaruba, who's the one that holds that we follow the idea that there's a lot of people, and just because there's a lot of people, you're allowed to keep the item? Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, it's Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. And shamat mina, you see from this, afilu b'rov Yisrael nami, that he says it even if it's majority Jewish, because in Bate Knasios and Bate Midrashos, it's majority Jewish. And the Gemara answers, Hacha b'mayaskin, and here what are we talking about? B'mefuzarin. We're talking about where the money is scattered, there's actually no siman, and that's the real reason you're allowed to keep the money, because there's no siman. The Gemara says, Ibn Mefuzar, and if we're talking about scattered money, what do we have to talk about a place where there's a lot of people? Even if it's a place without a lot of people, still the fact that it has no siman is the real reason you're able to keep the money. And so the Gemara says, and rather we're talking about where the money is bound, it is a siman. And here what are we talking about? We're talking about the gathering places of the non-Jews. We're not talking about the synagogues. The Gemara says, well, if that's the case, Bate Midrashos, Michael and Emma, what are you going to say by Bate Midrashos? There's no such thing by the Kananim. And so the Gemara says, Bate Midrashos didon di yasvivu Kananim. It could be we're talking about our Bate Midrashos, but the Kananim are the ones that happen to be sitting there. And so again, it's no proof that we're talking where it's majority Jewish. And the Gemara says, Hashta dasas lachi, once you're saying that, Bate Knasios nami didon, you could say also the synagogues, it's our synagogues, the yasvivu Kananim, that the Kananim happen to be sitting there. And Rashi says, Kinosios could mean asifas makam, it could mean the gathering area, a place where people gather. Shemeskansen shamlis, yayetzu levite, it's a place where the non-Jews are gathering in order to consult each other. The Yasvi Bukananim, or it could be again Jewish, but the Kananim are sitting there. And what would be the reason for that? Shein chutz leir, because these places are outside the city. Umoshiven Bukananim lishmor, so Kananim would stay there. They would essentially be guarding the area. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from the following Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Machshirin. Matzah ba'aved, if a person finds a lost object in the city, Imrov Yisrael, if it's majority Jewish, chayiv l'hachros, he has to announce it. Imrov Kananim, if it's majority Kananim, eino chayiv l'hachros, then he does not have to announce it. And so the Gemara says, Man shamad le diomar azlinan basaruba, who's the Tana that follows the concept that there's a lot of people in the area? Rav Shimon ben Elazar, it's Rav Shimon ben Elazar. Shamat minasa, you see from this Mishnah, ki ko'amar Rav Shimon ben Elazar b'rov Kananim. Rav Shimon ben Elazar only said that you're not obligated to announce the item when it's rov Kananim. Aval b'rov Yisrael lo, but he didn't say it by rov Yisrael. If it's majority Jewish, then the person is obligated to announce the item. So then the Gemara answers, no, Hamani Rabbanan, who's the author of this Mishnah? It's not Rav Shimon ben Elazar, it's actually the Rabbanan. But the Gemara says, still, Tifshamina, but still we can answer our question above, because we can answer the Module Rabbanan, Rav Shimon ben Elazar, that the Rabbanan would admit to Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Barov Kananim, that if it's majority Kananim, if it's majority not Jewish, that you're not obligated to announce the item. And so the Gemara says, Ela liolam Rav Shimon ben Elazar. He'd rather say again, go back to saying that the Mishnah actually is Rav Shimon ben Elazar. V'afilu b'rov Yisrael nami, and in general, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar would say his halacha even by rov Yisrael, meaning to say, in general, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar would say, if it's rov Yisrael, you're allowed to keep the item still, because again, it's found in an area with a lot of people. V'hacha b'mayaskinan, but here in this Mishnah Machshirin, what are we talking about? It's a specific situation. It's talking about betamun. It's talking about where the item is a concealed item. But the Gemara says, 1 second. If the item is concealed, how could you ever keep such an item? What's he keeping that item for? But we learned in a Mishnah, if he finds a vessel in a garbage heap, if it's covered up, essentially concealed, he shouldn't touch it, because the idea is the owner's planning on coming back to retrieve it. Megula, but if it's uncovered, no telomachers, then he takes it and announces it. And so again, how are we saying over here that it's concealed? He should never be able to take it if it's concealed. And the Gemara says to that, no, kedamar puppets, like Rapapa said in a different context. So we're talking about a garbage heap which normally is not cleared out, but the owner decided to clear it out. Hachanami here also, we're talking about a garbage heap which is not normally cleared out, but then the owner decided that he's going to clear it out. So already in such a situation, it will end up getting cleared out, it will end up getting destroyed. So if it's an area which is Rov Yisrael, you need to save it for the Jewish person, you take it and announce it. That's not the case if it's Rov Kananim. And Rashi explains, b'tamun, again, it's concealed. The kavan detamnu, since it's concealed, lav aveda, that's not called an aveda. Hilkach berov Yisrael yachers, that's why if it's majority Jewish, you announce it. And then the Gemara said, she'ina asuya lefanos, it's an area which is not normally cleared. Regilim hayu bailim lahanicha yamim rabim v'lo lefanos miyad. It's normal for the owners to leave the stuff there for a long time, not to clear it away right away. V'nimla cholel lefanos miyad, but then the owner decided to clear it away immediately. V'al karcho, so therefore it has to be, o yitzalenu, either you take the item, o yehefker, essentially it's going to be ownerless. And Rashi notes, lahachi nakat she'ina asuya lefanos, the reason why we're saying that in general it's not cleared, di asuya lefanos, because if this was an area that was always cleared, aveda midasi, then it's already the person is just giving up the item. It's as if he's making an aveda intentionally, shayelo lacha sham yifna, because he should have been concerned that it would be cleared away. So we want to make it a situation where it's not actually an aveda midas, but again, the owner does decide to clear the area. We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chavdalid Amid Beis.